The number of people who behind you.
Here on Morning Prime, I just want to show you also what we have on the latest edition of the business magazine. Our magazines, we have the Africa Business that is concentrating on justice at last. Justice at last, a problem question. Africa's battle for global taxes. That is what they're turning their focus on as well. Remember, that was a bigger issue that we had also from the US, that the global taxes also should be mainstreamed from the multinational, and that is coming into effect. It has been a long battle, but is it being effected? How also are we planning as a country to actually latch on this so that we can extend and expand our tax bracket? That is the African Business latest that we do have. Also, the Harvard Business Review, what most companies get wrong about managing talent. They misjudge what really matters to employees. They misjudge what really matters to employees. You can follow that particular story inside the latest copy of the Harvard Business Review. Also, we have the Kiplingers, right? You want to invest outside the country. This is all about personal finances. Where to invest in 2023. Investors could see a turnaround in stocks and bonds after a bumpy start to the year. Here's how to position your portfolio for a rebound. That is on page 26. Also, plus 8 stocks to buy now and 5 to sell. And Boggleheads, the view from Main Street. And we have also Lori, that is Calvasina, the RBC Capital Markets, saying, I think 2023 will be a recovery year for stocks. That is the projection there. That is the annual focus issue from the Kiplingers that you can follow. Forbes Africa is out. The rise of the unicorns, the business and startups commanding $1 billion or more valuations and building Africa's virtual marketplaces. That is a story that you want to focus on. It's also covering the story, or they have the cover model there of Ham Serungoji, who is the CEO and co-founder of Cheaper Cash. And he says Africa offers the great opportunity for exciting innovation in the world today. We continue with the conversation here on Sokoni, looking at the current state of play of our economy, capital gain tax that is checking into place this month. Also looking at what is happening in the counties right now, especially the counties of Nairobi, as we're winding up on that particular topic with Bunyasi Sakwa, who is an economist and, of course, a politician as well.
Yes,
yes.
A quick one on that. First of all, I think the spat between Governor Sakaja and Deputy President Riggy G is not needed. I think the current government and this leadership structures should learn to get work done rather than talk to the press. They can speak with each other. They can sit down in a meeting anytime and sort things quietly. It's happening in many parts of this current government as set up now, and I think the president is knocking order into it. So I hope that in another month or so, but it should be 6 months from when they were sworn in, President Ruto must really have got an order and rules of behavior among these. They say different things, they fight publicly, it's not necessary. But I was going to say, as a principle, I do not think that Riggy G should, that the Deputy President should really be intimately involved in affairs in any county, for that matter. He may have views and so on.
Indeed.
But you must allow the elected leadership and his persons to do things. They may get it right, they may get it wrong, but that's why there are elections and so on. They be kicked out. But if you don't allow that freedom, I think you can't develop. You're not going to easily develop the kinds of instruments that we have been talking about. Open competitive instruments, because you must get buy-in by the city, for example, in this particular case. You're not going to get buy-in by the city when the higher-ups are implying that you're elected, but I'm still here. Like I'm also in charge. You are not in charge, actually. So I don't just think that in this case there needs to be a little bit of space. But as a matter of principle, there must be firmness. They have defined clear goals for Nairobi, and for somebody like me, who grew up, and I began my working life after college, very early 70, 71. I joined the market here. Nairobi was a very orderly place. I lived in Jericho, Lumumba, which at that time was the outermost of the places. And the current developers there, those were just farms and so on, Sisal farms and I think some other farms there. But you could tell when your bus will arrive. You knew it could be off like 2 to 3 minutes.
The Kenya bus service, yeah.
Kenya bus services, yes.
Yeah. Was it number 7?
Or something like that.
Number
Yes.
7. Number 7.
It was very orderly. So we would do our breakfast in the house in the morning, cooking for ourselves, of course, we're all young men. And you timed when the bus, when the bus will come. And you walk out 2 minutes to it, it will come within 5 minutes of you having left your house. This was Nairobi. You stopped only at bus stops. You did not stop everywhere as it is. We have allowed disorder to take charge. And now anytime you try to fix things, there's a strong pushback. You saw the other day when TikTok, I don't know if it was TikTok or it was just a press statement, by some 3 fellows who say, no, we are, they said they were from rural Muranga, they said, and Sagaja must stop doing what their business interests or something like that. Now, the cleanup of Nairobi is going to affect people across the board, some more than others perhaps, depending on the initial distribution of presence. But this cannot be setbacks. If we don't do that, we're going to end up, look at New York, for example. It's one of the most unclean cities in America. It does work all right, but that's what a model you want to do and say we'll be like New York. You want to be like New York in terms of how they move money and so on, but maybe not in terms of the quality of the environment and so on. So I think we have many ways. London has cleaned up a lot. When, for those who have been going to London over the years, there's really cleaned up a hell of a lot. You must have some clear goals of where really you want to go. And I hope that Sakaja and his team will firmly go in that direction. And I hope that the central government has also the same objective, and in their meetings they can deal with those differences sitting across the table. I don't think they should go to the press. They make news even just by stepping out. That's already news. You don't have to add to that these parts and so on and so forth. I think they are just dissipating energy that the president could have used to move forward.
I think I go back to what Patrick said. It's about change management. And you see, the vision of getting a clean Nairobi has always been there. And I know that from way before some of these terminals, the one in Gara, over where you have the matatus now, I think that's where the matatus from Mombasa Road and the others were supposed to come and stop and then bring people in Nairobi. So the issue is there's need for order in Nairobi, and there's so much chaos, and it is chaotic. If you take Tomboya and you go all the way to Karioko on those sides, it's chaotic, it's chaos. And those are areas people like ourselves, I don't go there because of congestion, it's too much. Matatus are everywhere, everybody's. All that chaos, order is needed. And how do you bring that order? When you're changing people's behavior, you don't need democracy. No, you don't.
Not at all.
There are some things that you tell people, if you're caught stopping a matatu where it's not a designated stopping area to pick up a passenger, you will get a ticket. So it's an entire ecosystem. You have the police, you have the city askaris, but, and this is what I was calling now for the issue of having a simulated solution, because the other counties are also involved. You have Kajiado, you have Kiambu, and you have Muranga. There are 3 counties that are affected by what happens to the traffic system in Nairobi. And Machakos. So when you look at those 3, and that's why the national government has to be involved, because it's outside of Nairobi. The ripple effect of what happened here will have an effect in other counties as well, that have things and goods and people coming to Nairobi. So we have to simulate.
National government, meaning now the deputy president.
They have to be involved. That conversation, and that's what our prof was saying, that conversation needs to take place between the national government and the county government of Nairobi, because the impact goes beyond Nairobi. And therefore, we have a proper simulation and a change management process that will tell the people this is, and involve the stakeholders.
But this is flying in the face of what actually, Mheshimiwa Binyasi Sako is saying, that you need, this is your sovereign, fiefdom, so to speak. You need to make your own decision without the interference of the national government.
Which is fine, but there's also a national interest in other counties And that's what national
but I don't
government
think
comes
what
in.
Mheshimiwa is saying. Mheshimiwa is saying, and I think what I'm here from, it's a fact, but discuss it, don't discuss it in the papers.
Yeah.
Discuss
No,
it.
sit
There are a
down.
lot of
Sit down.
forums.
Yes,
There are a lot
it
of
affects
forums.
everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing about discussions.
Thank you.
And the national interest is order.
So to finish-
That's the national interest is order.
So to finish, Sakaja is right. We need to decongest this town, and with this madness and this chaos to kind of disappear in Nairobi.
Yeah.
But it's a longer term plan that needs a lot of investment on light rail. That's one. The other one is the larger bus capacities of 150 or 200 people. They'll be able to replace, well, you get one bus of 150, probably one line from here to Ngara. You have just replaced 10 matatus.
Yeah.
One bus. But order has to be there. The bus will pass by here at 8:30. If you don't, the next one is at 8:45. The next one is at 9. If you look at the cities that run in this world, precisely the bus is supposed to be here. Going back to the 70s and KPS and all that stuff, that order has to come back somehow. But that process has to be discussed between all the parties that are involved.
I mean, if you look, I mean, I love going back to the late Mzee Michuki.
Right.
The steps that he had in terms of doing exactly what you're discussing now were very clear. First of all, he said we have to bring order into the vehicle itself. That's when they forced people to wear seatbelts, what have you, and everything else. So that was the first bit of change management. And that one, he just said, we are going to do it brutally.
And it worked.
If you don't have it,
And it worked.
and it worked, right? And getting all these guys dressed up so that they're actually, you know, they feel that they're, you know, they're belonging to a community, right? And then they're allowed to behave well. The next stage that he did was to form the SACCOs, yeah? And the SACCOs was to bring accountability to the behavior of a group of transport providers, yeah? So all these guys were not supposed to operate alone like the matatus used to be, one person by themselves. Become a SACCO. And once you become a SACCO, as the people in charge, we can talk to the SACCO. And you remember there are times when SACCOs were being stopped from operating because of the behavior of some of the members of the SACCO. That was the objective, was to bring order through these SACCOs that were put in. The third stage was to go where, you know, in terms of now changing the business model. So that the SACCOs would then buy all the matatus in and change them with big buses. So the people who own individual matatus would become shareholders of a SACCO, and they'd be earning from the returns of the SACCO. That was where the change management process was, you know, you could see the steps that they were going to have, right? And the change from owning a matatu to owning shares in a cooperative, which is running transport, was going to be the most difficult change. Because most of the people who run matatus, they person for Sokoni kila siku. Yeah? And that is a problem. And that would have been a place where the change would have taken a bit of time, and you could have even put your foot down and said, SACCO, if you don't do it, you're out. Then those people would have had to start talking about amongst themselves, how do you do it? And they'd have found a way of doing it. So the SACCO was going to be the vehicle for creating change in the management of public transport. So I think we just need to go, and I think this whole essence of change management and understanding the steps which you take, like Michuki had, needs to be discussed with all these people together. The county governments, the ones that are feeding in, you know, the gardens for the city.
The metro
what they call the metropolitan area. Yeah, that metropolitan area has to be discussed as a metropolis, rather than being discussed as, you know, this is Nairobi County and that is whatever it is and so forth. Although the sovereignty of each county will still stay.
Right.
But the planning,
It's an integrated plan.
right? The planning and the way it is being done, and the influencing process and everything else should be done at the metropolis level. And when that happens, the metropolis level, Rigiji can have his say in that metropolis level, right? Because that is an agency that can only be created by a superior body, which is the national government. But then the county governments are all now working within that kind of place.
Well,
and that is how it should work.
Well, maybe hacking back also to Honorable Gidai's time, who's the current
Still in Vienna.
ambassador
in Vienna.
In Vienna right now. Yes,
Vienna,
yes.
yeah.
who came up with was it the Nairobi Metropolis?
Yep.
There was a Nairobi Metropolis project that was during the Kibaki days. What really happened to it, and how can we borrow from what you're really talking about with the Metropolis?
I don't know whether the laws were repealed.
They were repealed.
I don't recall clearly.
But there was actually an act that created the Namata.
Yeah,
The Namata itself.
Whatever it is. There are laws that were put into place, and then they just fell by the wayside because the political will. I think, was it Kalonzo Musyoka? No, there was somebody, one of the Musyokas who was...
No, it goes back what we were saying earlier on. You come in your own way to do things.
Yeah.
There's no follow through. And I think it was a very good idea. It had actually Kajiado, Kiambu, Muranga, and all those kind of things. Yes. And I was seeing it from that perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. We can wind up. I think this is now what you were talking about with the Gasos cartoon, just to show you what they've drawn today.
The one in the Standard.
Yeah, the one in the Standard today. Gaso has drawn this Karibu Nairobi CBD. No matatus past this point, as you can see there. Is the governor of Nairobi, who is the Kanjo now.
Proper Kanjo.
And we have the driver here from Mount Kenya Sacco. And they say, Kijana, do you know who I am?
That sounds like somebody who was fired as a deputy chief justice.
Chief Justice, exactly.
Right there. Yeah, I just want us, I know also Patrick will be, of course, leaving us in a moment, to not just hark back to the tax issue as well, because I can see if we can go through the dailies as well. Rwanda is coming up with a plan as well to try and tame in some of the tax fraud. They're saying tax refund fraud to attract 5-year jail term. Tax refund, of course, they say here is a reimbursement made when taxes withheld on earnings are more than what a person owes. And earlier I'd mentioned the global tax that it seems also Professor Ndungu has not really mentioned on his plan on taxation as well, getting tax ready. The multinationals that we have in this country and all over Africa, Africa has been fighting for this. Finally, it is coming through. How are we bound to benefit from this? Let me begin with you, Panyasi Sabo.
I think first we must pay tax, and the tax must be collected to aggregate it and push it back as government expenditures in various ways. But we should also know that in getting tax, in approving taxes, either what kind of tax it is, its typology, or what rates there are, is going to be resistance. Capital gains in this country has been very slow to pick up, partly because right from the 70s, the attitude then in the first administration, was it the first or second? No, first administration, was that the Kenyans, they didn't own property, and so on. So everything had to be done to allow them to do that. But I think we have carried too far to a point where it became a class benefit, in the sense that those who are in the property area, for example, resisted passing those taxes. So I think this expansion in the tax base, particularly now in the technology sector and in other sectors, these are all essential ingredients what must be done. What people will expect, though, is that both in fact and in perception, the tax use application of taxes will improve. That is not going to be part of the personal gains of individuals. People are not going to steal from the public purses, where people are paying money, including the hustlers that are paying money, even if you're borrowing your 500 shillings and so on. And I think when people get a sense that there's a payback to it, that the resources are getting back to them in one way or another, it will be slightly more comfortable. But I think it will take us a whole generation to respect the fact that paying taxes is a civic duty for the country. But which should not in any way deter us. In America, where a failure to pay taxes is perhaps taken more seriously than a murder charge, people still complain, but they don't complain in high tones and so on. So I think we really have to set our goals, and I think the goals are being set. For me, the social goals that are being set are just where we ought to be. Now, to see it through, to stick with it, and get institutions that will be able to realize that dream, created and functioning or strengthened, and of course have the taxes that will pay for it. These are difficult things that are going to take a little time. And I think the president has to do what he's doing. He has to play CEO. My panelists have used that expression, which I think is beautiful, that he has to play CEO all through and be a hard one, and be a hard one. If not, I think there have been too much blabbering around, which for me, that's spinning the wheel like a hamster.
Patrick?
Yeah, I think for me, the issue of tax collection has to be followed, or not in part, has to be done in parallel with tax application. The two of them must be fully linked to convince the taxpayer that the application is going to benefit them in one way or another.
Right.
Right? And you saw the road levy, how Kenha was sort of putting boards up everywhere. Your money is being used to repair this road, and so forth and so on. People all of a sudden now link the levy to an action, right? And if you're going to get, people who are philanthropic enough to pay their tax, and I'm talking about philanthropy because anybody who's been put on tax tries to sort of be efficient or evade it if they can.
Become a philanthropist.
Yeah. So you have to be a philanthropist to pay your tax because you love to do something and you want development in the country, etc., etc. If we are going to get a conversion of the national and the way people think nationally, that issue of tax, tax collection and application, and talk about it very loudly must be done very, very quickly. We know that the health service is funded by the tax, but look at how it works. I don't trust the health service. Yeah? Who goes into those hospitals? They only go there because of desperation, not because they want to. But if you could start showing the fact that you're applying tax to hospitals, there's drugs, they're working well, and whatever it is, the nurses are not going on strike, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And the hospital becomes a place that there is efficiency, people go there, they get service, and they're out, and the deaths go down, etc. There's a whole range of benefits that we can do if tax collection and tax application are done concurrently and transparently to the nation. Right? And whether it means doing it through county government, through national government, whatever, that whole conversation about the application of tax must be one that our CEO has to weave the right narrative so that we are actually saying, I am willing to pay tax because I can see the benefit. The example that I've used when we've had these discussions during the tax conferences is the person in Gikomba, the guys who are doing all these sandukus and everything else and so forth. What is it that you can do to them using tax that will convince them to pay tax?
Pay more.
Yeah? And for them, it would be simple order in that area, right? Create sheds, proper sheds in that place, right? Where they pay a very small amount of money to be in those sheds. Provide lighting, a good electricity distribution system, provide toilets, and a place where the other
Clean
mamas
water.
can come and clean water,
Yep.
and a place where the people who cook food can cook and they can go and eat. Just build that image in your mind of Gikomba transforming into that kind of thing, and use government money, tax, to make that happen. Why wouldn't they pay tax?
Yeah. And I think the point here is, really, let's not tell them you're going to pay more taxes, but do things will make them pay the taxes.
Exactly.
And the saying goes that if you have any government, any regime, which it sees the only way to enhance its revenues through taxation, it's the most lazy government. It's the laziest government in the world. You sit down, the only way you can raise revenue is taxation. Let's see what we can do so people can freely pay the taxes. And I think that's what you're asking for.
Expand the economy.
Expand the economy.
If I go and the next day I'm in the garage buying the spare part because of the roads. There's a road there's a road I think it's called Ruda Road. If you actually use the Ruda Road up to Kiambu, when it's raining, you better go slow because there are potholes somewhere.
Yeah.
And you can't see them. And that is a high-end kind of a place I'm talking about. I think that's the whole issue of taxation, even the issue you're bringing here, that the justice, I like the word, justice as a last. Justice for what? So what are you collecting all these taxes for? And I think that's what you're saying. If we can see what the tax is doing. There are countries where they are paying 65% in the world, but they see what the taxation is all about.
And they do. And we got the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah.
Yes.
The taxation
you are
is
there,
very
know
high.
it.
70%.
70%,
Yeah.
60%, 70%. But the system runs. The healthcare system works.
Yeah.
The public transport system works.
Yeah.
The schools work.
Yeah.
All these things work. So it's, for me, it's not an issue of taxation. It's an issue, going back to Patrick, how do you spend? It's tax and spend. Where do you spend that money?
Right.
On what do you spend it? On who do you spend it, and how do you spend that money?
Yeah.
Now, your example about Gikomba and all that goes back to what I've been preaching for many years about the formalization of the informal sector to improve and increase our tax base.
Yeah.
You have to give them a rationale of why are you doing this. Otherwise, they will stay down there with their dirt and everything else, as long as they're not being bothered by askaris and everybody else will be there. But there's such a huge tax base in the informal sector. But you have to convince them that this is how you're going to benefit by doing so. There's a concept that we have tried, and we have tried in another country. It's called make a space.
Make a space.
Make a space. You go to Gikomba, for example, and you get all these laser cutting equipment, all these machinings that you need to make things that these guys spend a whole day hammering on all those metals that they do, the smelting that they do. I visited that place about 4 years ago when we were putting together one of the MasterCard project, Young Africa Works. And I can tell you, my brother, I've never been in there. That was my first time getting in. But they're smelting metal, the way they were doing it,
100 years ago.
Not even 100 years ago, when they're doing shipbuilding in Stone Age. If you watch the movie Moses, and you saw those guys with things that are
bellows.
They are got fire on that side, and somebody is holding. They are doing that here in Nairobi, and you don't need to do that. So what we need to do is to make a space for them, using taxpayers' money, and then we tell them, now we have to register your business. When you come here and you start using these machines, you pay by the hour that you use or by the space that you're using. It's been experimented here in this country. You go to Gong Road, you do the same thing. You do a make a space. You want to make a bed? Yes. Here you feed, you're designing this machine here, we'll cut your wood, you just cut it, go and put it together. You start to slowly get these people organized, get them mechanized, and that will solve the issue of consistency in quality of products in this country as well. As informal as it is totally doable.
Change management.
Yes.
That's the whole point. You're putting the facility in.
Yes.
And you're creating an incentive for them to go in, and then they see it, they taste it, they like it, and then you get an impact.
So instead of that carpenter with a
I like the word consistency. And I like giving this example. I used to go to Jogonas very often when I was a bit younger. Rarely do I go there.
That is relatively speaking.
Indeed. And I think I went on Saturday. After about 2 years, the meat was tasting the same. Consistency.
Oh, and I thought the consistency was not there.
And I told my friend, this place has never changed in terms of giving good quality. And that's what we are looking for, in a consistency and good service.
Which goes back to your argument about ring fencing. When we put that maker space for all those guys on Gong Road, on all those other furniture places, and they use those, then the government comes and says, we are going to ring fence the furniture industry in this country and direct all this to these individuals that are buying this. So from the bottom, you start now having people who have larger incomes, you have people who are paying taxes, and therefore, and you tell government...
Did I hear bottom-up economics?
It's bottom-up, that's exactly what it is. It's bottom-up economics. Okay, that's what it is. So what you do then, you start to get these people who are disempowered by the environment, get them empowered, and they become participants. They become economic citizens, they hire other people to do the same, and then the government tells every county government or every national government office, no more furniture from Malaysia or these other places. You buy all of it from here. You start creating enterprises.
Right, thank you. I need to release Patrick, who is bound to be leaving right now. Of course, it is Thursday, Thursday, and this has to be put into the Constitution. as a board meeting day. For most, board members.
This is
Thursday,
true.
I don't know why they chose Thursday, right? And that is Patrick. But you can just give us your closing remarks, even just to comment on the betting firms that they have to pay taxes daily now, as KRA is demanding and tightening its noose on them. By 1 a.m., if you've not done so, then punitive measures are coming into place. You get penalties.
1 a.m. or 1 p.m.?
1 a.m.
1 a.m. in the morning.
In the morning.
I think the essence here, let's not just look at the betting people, but look at what's the new tax, the new VAT machines that they've got, right? That is almost working real time.
The ATRs.
Yeah, the ATRs.
The current ones.
Yes. What you're pushing to, and South Africa, I think, has got this already, is a real-time economy where all the elements within the economy are interlinked. So when you talk about payment of tax, when you're on a commercial operation, that tax is automatically sort of, your tax expectations are generated as you do your business, right? And then you will have a payment system that you pay tax as you do the business because you're receiving cash there, right? So you don't delay to sort of paying tax at the end of the month, right?
Makes sense.
What means, it means that the exchequer is going to have a very efficient collection process for tax. I mean, I don't go and pay my tax. My employer automatically deducts it and sends it at the time I receive my money, right? They do it, okay, it takes a bit of time, but eventually that should be automatic. That the day the payroll is being run, automatically the employers sends tax to KRA, right? That is, I think, the intent that is showing that even within the gambling business, whatever it is and so forth, the betting areas and so forth, where there is a commercial activity taking place, the tax that is due has to be collected and paid as an income is received at that point. And I think that's the message that this is that we're getting. It's not about just them. It's about the fact that the current CS in Treasury is looking at having a real-time tax collection system that as you spend, as you earn, as you do this, you're paying your tax at that point in time.
And I think it's something you should also be seen with the lawyers. You know, the lawyers, interesting guys, they tell you to deposit something for this case.
Yeah.
That case might take 6 months. So that money was actually deposited in the account.
And
you can imagine the kind of interest those buggers get. Oh, yes.
The buggers.
There can't be anything else. They have no use.
I think that story around the sort of the betting, whatever it is an indicator of the direction that they want to go in terms of real-time tax.
Thank you.
But I think it should not be just the betting firms.
It should be with everybody.
It should be everybody.
Yeah.
Even the buggers.
The landed friends. I mean, they do that one.
Let's hear from Bunyasi Sakwa, especially on the World Bank. I wanted just to comment on the World Bank that now is one.
He is a biased man. He used to work for World Bank.
Yes,
He'll be biased.
On the sovereign debt risk that now Ghana, Kenyans, Sierra Leone, they've been picked up, they've been flagged by World Bank on the sovereign debt risk.
Yes, I guess views from the World Bank are normally listened to. If you're the biggest lender in town, people are going to sort of cautious what they say to you. So they have a pedestal there, a big bullpit.
Yeah. Can I release Patrick? Yeah, we can have the business daily there on air. So that yes, Patrick, thank you so much.
Yes, I think our banks have been very active in financing the economy through provision of by lending to government. It has been an easy way of borrowing because it's quite silent as it is in Kenya. They don't need to seek anybody's permission except when even the debt ceiling discussions, these domestic operations don't show up on the radar. We're always focusing on the external debt and so on. But the same bank, and let me differentiate that, IMF and World Bank, I don't know if they are on the same platform on this, but I know IMF was, did suggest that Kenya should do more borrowing domestically than externally. Do more external than the domestic borrowing, but that shift was going to take time. I think that we have continued to discount our paper domestically, so commercial banks have been very important in lending to government. But I think as government overall, pushes the limits on sovereign debt, on public debt, particularly external, but in totality, you reach to a point where tax collection, 70 cents or so for every shilling collected, is going to pay taxes, largely external, but also some of it domestic. Then the whole economy is at risk. So the banks are, also bear that risk. So I think it's maybe time to step back and say, hey, what are we doing? Now, I was very concerned about issues of public debt. I, in fact, did get legislation drafted.
Indeed.
It was discussed in Parliament. It passed all the stages, and we couldn't conclude at the end. Unfortunately, those who are not in government then supported the bill. When they get into government, they get a little cool at the back. Because they look at it simply as a way of gagging borrowing. No, we are talking about rationalizing borrowing, improving the record keeping, improving the analytics in it, linking it a bit more with the goals that have to be met, and also ensuring that you eliminate waste domestically, that you only borrow, not domestically, in the chain, you only borrow when you have to, because you can generate resources from within the enterprise, like an organization growing organically, but you can also grow it by external inputs of resources, if you can manage those put together. So I think that that is, I think, a good warning shot, that our institutions have to worry about the level of sovereign risk. And let me tell you, there are people out there who will manage us. If you are heavily indebted, they will manage us. You can borrow from China and so on, but you cannot refuse to pay. That's not an option. That's something that people don't realize. You can borrow from these Bretton Woods institutions, but you can't afford to refuse to pay. They will mobilize everybody else around the world, even your former friends, to begin to say, hey, you must pay that first before you come. It's time we begin to think about sustainable debt. But I think that if there's any opportunity, this is it, that the president is concerned about the health of the economy. He wants a faster growth. He wants, although at the same time, he wants to deal with the social objectives that we have to deal with the bottom tier. But he has got someone like Dung in the Treasury, who is a good economist, so that together, I hope that we will begin to refocus on the welfare of the poor. But the poor are also a source of tax revenue and so on. They are not completely helpless. Equity Bank has proven that for us. So that I think worrying about a managed economy, worrying about a macroeconomic system that people understand, you must shake that loose, people understand it, and what sort of debt levels, there will be debt levels all the time, but sustainable ones is going to be a very important one. So the sovereign risk issue, I think, is a warning shot.
It's a warning shot.
Yeah.
The president also was quite convincing that, our sovereign assets, they're intact, they are not a threat. So we should not be worrying about any ports, any asset in this country being taken over by the Chinese or any other lender as such. So in light of what this warning flag is telling us, what caution should we actually have, not really throw in the air, but really be cautious about? Let's hear from Professor Dominic Point.
Yeah, as Meshmi was talking here, I was thinking about a country called Japan.
Japan.
Where a majority of borrowing in Japan is actually domestic borrowing, up to 225% of almost 250% of their GDP, and we don't have much pressure like we do with external borrowing when it comes down to domestic borrowing. I think our domestic borrowing, we are at about 50%. I believe about 50% of our debt is domestic borrowing.
Yes, 52,
about 52, 50. Yeah. So the exposure is there for the local banks, but then at the same time, I'll be looking at how does the government now start to expand the tax base, so that we are collecting more and there is more money going to the treasury through taxation, not necessarily overtaxing those who are already being taxed. We need to improve on the bottom part of the. Now, that's why the access to finance by the poor. And Mheshimiwa gave the example of Equity Bank. Equity Bank used to be that, but it's no longer part of.
That's what brought them up.
That's what brought them up. Yes. Now we need those other 30-tier banks that will be, Chase was there for a minute before it went bust. Now we need 30 banks that are going to have, to give access to financing for the small and medium-sized enterprises, so that we can start to expand the economy. When that is lacking, those who would like to expand their businesses are not able to do that. So we need more stronger 30 banks that will be able to do that. At the same time, we need a deliberate government effort to work with some of these banks for agri-financing. We talk about, because the issue of debt and the repayment of debt, they are all tied in the entire ecosystem of economic development, which includes all the sectors that can create jobs to increase the tax base. And once we do that, and we're having more money coming in, I think with the target of about 4 trillion, I think we're coming to about 4 trillion now for the budget probably that's coming.
It's almost headed there, yeah.
About 4 trillion that's coming. If we are going to be able to finance that budget, we have to be able to generate enough taxes in order for us to stop borrowing to finance our current expenditure. So that balance needs to be maintained, but at the same time, not necessarily overtaxing those who are already being taxed, but by increasing the tax base through the provision of the mechanisms to allow the small and medium-sized enterprises to start to grow and to hire more people. And through multiplier effect, we should be able to do that. If you look at the U.S., majority of the U.S. economy is actually driven by medium and small enterprises, because they generate all these jobs. Those guys who are hiring 10 people, 15 people, 30 people, they are more of those and generating more revenues than the Walmarts and the other guys that are hired that have 500,000 people, 100,000 people. And therefore, the engine of the economy is the small and medium-sized enterprises. We have to build that infrastructure so that the tax burden is not on the government having to borrow to finance their expenses, but to make it also possible for these people to bring in more revenues. However, how we use those revenues and taxes is also another question. The loopholes that Professor Inena was talking about in terms of the money that we spend. As we collect this money, we have to look where are we spending this money? How are we spending this money? Are we collecting more and therefore there is more waste in government and all that? And that's why I like the direction that the president is headed. That's why I call him the CEO president. Because he is firm on the direction that he wants the country to go. He is firm on the direction that he wants not only the budgeting process to go, but also the collection of taxes, but also the expansion of the tax base. And for me, the expansion of the tax base is one of the biggest things that we can achieve in order to rid ourselves of dependency on foreign borrowing.
Okay. Let's talk about the business environment a bit, because we have the raising of taxes, and we can look on the flip side on how it is affecting some of the businesses, the business environment in this country. Right now, we just read earlier during the paper review that almost 200, going to 300 employees at Facebook now are facing, redundancy, because the Facebook hub in this country is falling because of the high cost of doing business. Yeah. So if we're going this way, we want to really expand our tax bracket, with the capital gain tax, with the global tax, the corporate tax, the multinational tax. Right now, fuel will be going up. How then do we sustain? As much as you want to expand, how much do you become an investor-friendly environment? So this is, we were talking about the other time, I think, was it Nestle as well? That was closing shop, or was Colgate Palmolive? I don't, last year. Yeah, so, Nestle. Yes, Nestle.
Yeah, I think maybe there, I want to pick up on a few things that my colleagues have talked about. But the first one is interesting when you talk about the external and internal borrowing. And there are cases where countries have celebrated because they have less of external borrowing. Argentina was one of it, Lebanon, when they were off the borrowing from the IMF. And my thinking has, and it still continues, that we are better off borrowing in the domestic market, not the way we are doing currently. But if we are going to talk about private-public partnerships, if we are going to construct roads, if we are going to do that, you can mobilize the resources we have. The farmers, the SACCOs have a lot of resources which you can mobilize. And I like the point Dominic's bringing here of equity. Equity did a fantastic job when it was going up, the rural areas. And right now it's another level. And you look at most Scandinavian countries where the late Professor Joseph Mungai, the Vice Chancellor of University of Nairobi, he really wanted to emphasize the idea of cooperatives movement in this country, the Harambee spirit by Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. And those Scandinavians, most of them have farmers' banks, you know. And when I look at the Hustler Fund, it's a great idea. But we could actually push it towards the farmers' bank. Because the farmers, and somebody mentioned the other day, I think it's the president who said the other day, all the farmers will go to heaven. Because they feed us. It's the most important resource you have in any country, farmers. And it's a time to think about that bank, which can actually support what we are headed by. Really what I'm referring to here is mobilizing the internal borrowing. And it can be done. As I said last time we were here with the Kiprono and the others, they're a student I'm guiding. What are these we need to put in place to encourage us to borrow through PPPs of the local aspect? Now, the issue of high taxation, even the capital gain tax, and Mheshimiwa was bringing it earlier on, and we've been taking it to the parliament. And you have a big cartel in this country, which actually they don't see any benefit from them. They'll kill it. And they have done that consistently. And I think that's why the country leadership, strong leadership in the country, no-nonsense leadership, if you wish, comes very strongly. Because what you're going to do, if the taxation is high, and I can't meet my obligation, even pay, I lay people off. Interesting what that does, laying people off. Look at this guy of Tesla.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, yeah. He has gone into the Guinness books as the only person, billionaire, who have lost so much because of the shares came down. He went to the Guinness book. It had never happened there before. Why? Laying off people. You know the first thing when he bought Twitter, that's what he did. Was it Twitter he bought? Yeah. Yes. Now, bring us to the home. If we are going to raise taxes, and that's what Patrick before he left was saying, it should be driven by what I'm making, really. If I'm not making, and you tax me more, then surely the first thing I will do is lay off. And what does that spillover effect have? You have now what we call, from where my friend comes, people being at the shopping center, just counting the vehicles passing. We call it mungedo. You're just looking at the vehicles here. But I think we need to be careful in terms of the taxation, raising the taxes. Yeah, and also the way, and I've said this before, the way Kenya Revenue Authority deals with issues of people who are not meeting their civic duty of taxation is not going with a hammer. And I've said this, Will, they should, in my view, and I hope the new chair of that, establish a business advisory department.
Thank you. Let's leave it at that because our time is up and we get our closing remarks. Let's just begin from Professor Dominic Mwenja. No, from Bonyasa Sakwa, then 30 seconds as we're closing. Yeah, you close. We begin with you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think all I could say now is I'm very excited about the way the new government has anchored its socio-economic strategy with the issues of around the bottom, where the majority of the Kenyans live, but which has major implications for the rest. It has major implications for the rest of the economy. We talk about diversification, increasing our export potential, and so on. There's potential in this structure. Because the ordinary person, finally, is going to be that farmer who will be doing it. Of course, also that investor who might be providing the funds and so on. But we want to be able to get a more monetized economy, so we can use the Japan type example. In Japan, Professor hadn't mentioned though, that Japan is one of the few countries in the world in which the gross national product is much greater than the gross domestic product. What they produce outside of their borders is about 10% bigger than the domestic economy. So for them, borrowing and doing business operations is almost a simultaneous transaction, and they're also a reserve economy in some respects. So I really think that this focus on the economy is going to have major dividends as we begin to look at it. We are all going to get involved. Wananchi will be involved one way or another. They are all going to be paying taxes, but they must see the benefits of that.
Indeed. Professor, briefly.
Yeah, I think for me, and especially observing the president, the cabinet the last couple of weeks, is an exciting moment for the country to see a CEO president who is working very, very hard and holding everybody responsible for what they're supposed to do. And if we continue in that direction, I think Kenya is headed to better days, and especially when we start bringing the people at the bottom to the middle. When I wrote the book on bottom-up approach, that's what I was looking at. That's what we were looking at. Getting the people who are at the bottom to come to the middle so that we can expand the tax base and therefore we create more wealth. So it's exciting to see what the president is doing. The steady pace that he has taken to holding everybody responsible, and at the micro level, and that's where we miss the point a lot of times. We have very good discussions at the macro level, but then at the micro level we don't.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to see that happen.
Thank you. Gachagua, briefly.
Yeah, mine is briefly. I want to just to a quote I got interesting here, page 17 of the Standard, and it's Governor Kika sacks 600 workers. It says by Michael Uma, when you get employed politically, you'll be fired politically. Go to school or TVET, learn, qualify, tarmac like other poor Kenyans with no connection, and get a job based on your academic qualifications. Those are my closing remarks. Very interesting.
All right, so you're not hired politically, you'll be fired politically. Thank you very much. I really appreciate all of the tweets having you on Thursday to just try and, slide